So running horizontally.
They had them like vertical. As far as I know, vertical, horizontal, longitudinally, and then latitudinally.
Yeah, there's wood laid all in this thing. So
basically, they made like a Lincoln log frame and then filled stones in.
That's an easy way to think about it.
Yeah, don't think of it as a Lincoln log as they built a log cabin, but it's just a framework.
Right. But she's got it right in terms of the way the wood would be laid in, so that it would get, it'd all catch itself on fire, and then you'd get the maximum square footage of wood to ore ratio.
Okay.
You're on par.
Then I don't need a weird dumb analogy.
Okay.
Yeah. Although other theories, and you're probably going to talk about this, have the wood not being deliberately burned, but being part of a stabilizing structure between the two outer walls, the inner and the outer wall, and being a stabilizing structure that kept that whole pile of rubble in between the two walls all kind of.
I would imagine that would be, in the kiln method, I would imagine that was what the earth piled on the outside was meant to do, rather than wooden structure, because the wooden structure would burn up.
But I'm saying it's like,
it's not the kiln
version. If the wood was
version.
not intended to be burned, it was intended as a framework to actually shore up the castle walls.
Got it. Yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say. I mean,
again, you don't know. I mean, we don't know if this was intended to be a framework to make it all stronger, or it was intended to be burned to create heat. We don't know it.
Yeah.
Wish we did. Time machine. Time machine. I know. I can just picture it. I'm going to step out of my time machine, and I go, dude, what you doing? Who's he? Kill him.
Immediately.
Yeah, the successful time traveler. Yeah.
Where'd he come from?
Why did these guys never come back?
Weird.
So real quick, let's circle back to something that we talked about as we were discussing this method, because it'll play into everything that we talk about later. I talked about the different sizes of stone that was going to be thrown into the wall during the construction for the vitrification process. Now, I had written this down wrong, and thankfully Joe caught it. But what it is the small stones have, help me out with, what's the proper way to put this, Joe? They
have a high surface to volume ratio.
So they're going to melt faster.
Yeah.
Because a big stone's going to take a long time to heat all the way through, but a small stone is not.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's more likely to vitrify.
Yeah, because it's like your hands, for example, have a very high surface to volume ratio.
Mm-hmm. So
which is why you have to wear gloves in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Just totally interrupt you to say the exact same thing you're saying.
Yeah.
But the point is that those are the ones that are going to vitrify, and they're the ones that are going to end up making.
They're going to melt faster.
Fuse everything together to make that solid wall.
Kind of makes them into sort of a mortar in of themselves.
Yeah. It is a method of making mortar in a rudimentary fashion.
Yeah. If that's what it was intended by this process.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
This theory is presuming that's what it's for. The second part of how it was done, second theory, is the open fire method, which I'm a little dubious on, but we'll go ahead and run through this.
Well, I mean, you may be dubious, but it does take a lot less. Like this is way easier.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
I don't agree with that, but that's okay, because we still don't know. So some researchers have said, well, listen, it's obvious that they weren't using a kiln method, and so what the builders were doing is they were piling wood on the outside of these walls and then maintaining that fire to get enough heat to vitrify it. And the research says that in order for this to work, what they would have to have done is plan this out for a time when they knew the wind was going to be blowing in a certain direction, so it would act as a billows, and it would push all of that heat into the wall and help keep maintaining it, because it's pushing oxygen into that fire, and it's going to help burn it hotter.
Obviously, a windy day would be very helpful for this.
Absolutely.
Although we are saying, I mean, this is Scotland, right? I mean, it's not like
they don't ever get windy storms. You're absolutely right. I'm not.
Just saying.
My thing is, I'm a little unsure about this, because I know I sent you guys the link to this, but there's more than one person who has tried to recreate a vitrified fort, and one of them was a guy by the name of Ian Ralston, who did it back in 1984. Joe, you are too young, Devin. Joe, do you remember Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, the TV show?
Vaguely. I didn't watch it at the time. I mean, I read all of his books when I was a kid, but I never, not all of them, a lot of them. I don't think I ever saw the actual show, though.
I remember this show because it has the crystal skull in the intro, and I always remember that. But Ralston he's on an episode of that show, and he builds a wall, and he builds a really big wall. I'm guessing, the dimensions are a guess here, but I think it was about 8 foot high, about 10 foot wide, and somewhere between 15 and 20 foot long. And it was a freestanding wall. He didn't have anything packed around the sides or anything like that, but still had wood running horizontally, or from front to rear face, and then he stacked a bunch of wood on top, and they lit it on fire. The problem is that wood, to get that thing up to heat and keep it up to heat, like 6 truckloads. Like, I was laughing, and they had to call in an order from the local, dustmen.
Yeah.
They were throwing
They brought in furniture and tossed it on there.
And it took them like all day.
This is the problem with this thing, is that you build this, you lean all this wood against it, light it on fire, and most of the heat just goes straight up and past your wall.
Yeah,
you know?
the campfire issue.
Yeah, the only way to really do it is to build pack in so much wood that eventually you get this big, huge pile of coals, like embers, up against your wall, and then you'll get some juice out of it. But
yeah, and he poured wood on it for a day, constantly, and in the end, like I said, it was about, it looked like 6. I think they said 6 truckloads, and this is so
it didn't
sad.
do that much, really.
Well, no, the sad part was watching them demolish the wall with the backhoe, and he didn't vitrify hardly anything. He got some small stones to go to a semi-glass-like state and fuse, but that was
Not much.
it.
Yeah, I didn't get a lot of action out of it. Yeah, he should have just left the ruin for somebody 1,000 years from now to worry about.
Well, the hilarity is, of course, Arthur C. Clarke is, in the episode the whole way through doing his dialogue, and he talks about the fact that for the vitrified forts that we knew of in 1980, and I'm sure there's more been found since then, they weren't all found at that time, it would have taken at least half of the forests of Scotland in order to create enough heat to have vitrified all of that stone.
That's one of the issues I have with this, is the assumption that they used wood when I think they should have used coal, and there is lots of coal in Scotland.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me coal would be a lot easier when you're thinking about the energy that's in a piece of coal versus a commensurate piece of wood. If you're going to have your soldiers laboring day after day after day, hauling logs up the hillside versus hauling loads of coal, it sounds to me like you get a lot more bang for your buck having to drag coal up the hillside.
You went down the coal path, and I didn't even think to. Did you look up anything to see when the earliest mining of coal in Scotland was?
It's not recorded, really. I mean, it's like, you can find out about like more modern, like several centuries ago or whatever. There's records about that, but beyond that, there's nothing.
I wonder about.
But it doesn't mean that they weren't using and digging it up. I mean, if somebody dug up a massive coal pit back in the day, and then just their civilization goes away, it gets overtaken by nature again. Nobody knows it's a coal pit.
Well, I was just saying, I wonder about peat, because peat is a huge fuel source in that area.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reason everybody focuses on the wood is because, like I said, you can see impressions and voids that they have identified as having had to have been from posts.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily.
It doesn't mean it's the only source.
Yeah, exactly. Because I would think you would need an exterior source as well.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it is that they put peat or coal. Because obviously, if they have forges, they're using coal of some kind, right? I mean, that's I'm pretty sure that's the only way you can get things to go that high, but maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can go pretty high with. I mean, house fires get up to like 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit.
I was gonna say I've had wood stoves.
So half this.
Which is still not high enough.
Yeah. So I almost wonder if it was like a dual method sort of thing.
Well,
I don't
because
know.
I mean, like, for example, it would have to be, if you're using the logs just to stabilize your pile of rocks while you're burning it and then vitrifying it. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't exactly use chunks of coal to do that particular function.
Right. Right. But then bonus, it burns and creates more internal heat.
Yeah, if
Great.
that's your intention. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing is, so Ralston wasn't the only guy who's ever tried to vitrify a wall. There was, and you will see these referenced everywhere, but there was 2 experiments done, one in 1934 and again in 1937. And the first experiment was very similar to Ralston's. They built a wall, they had wood running through it, they had stone in the middle. Although these guys, they cheated a little bit because they used fire clay brick for the outsides of the wall, which will stack better, and it will be it has a better insulative capacity because there's no gaps in the seams. It's not giant holes from stacked rock. They did it. It was really funny to get the bellows effect. They lit it at the beginning of a snowstorm, and the wind was raging, and the whole thing was burning hot. But eventually, their wall collapsed. So there was a fault there. The next day when they checked it out, they did find that some of the material inside had vitrified, so they had achieved results, but not perfect results.
Well, it does, again, it's Scotland, and it makes me think of, like, the kind of wind that blows through right before a rainstorm when we get them here. I mean, granted, rain isn't, like, great for fire sustained.
But if it's a hot fire, the rain doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it's not that hard to say, oh, yep, looks like there's a storm coming, time to light that fire. And there's also nothing to say that they didn't have these things set up. It wasn't like they were just sitting around thinking, oh, okay, I guess maybe there's
hurry quick, it looks windy.
That they would be like, okay, well, we've got it to the stage, and the wind is blowing, we better go light that thing. Yeah,
Get it ready, and when the weather conditions are right,
Well, because it probably took a long time to set this. I mean, this is the era of true manual labor. You want to get that stone from here to 5 miles away, you can start dragging it.
Yeah,
it's going to take you a while to get it there.
You or the oxen or the horses or whatever.
Right.
But somebody's going to drag it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. That's a valid point. And so, so I talked about there's also the 1937 experiment. It was actually a heck of a lot more successful. It was kind of a hybrid of the stack on the outside and the kiln method. The same people or another group of people did this experiment. They had cut into a vitrified wall to excavate it, to check it out, and then they stacked a bunch of material back in that void, and they tried the process there. So it's capped on the ends. They did manage to vitrify a lot of the material. Their wall didn't collapse, but it did settle. But in the reading, it talks about the fact that the way it settled and how uneven the top was sort of represents other vitrified walls, which, again, makes sense. As things settle and melt and collapse, you're going to get... All that it means that I don't know how they did this. These are the two prevailing methods. Peat, coal, some other fuel source. We really just don't know.
I really want... You guys know that YouTube channel, Primitive Technology?
No. Sounds interesting.
It's pretty good, yeah. It's just this guy that goes out into the wilderness and basically is just working his way through primitive technology. I think he's at the Stone Age. He's got a furnace that he's made from clay, that he has like a little wind thing, and he's making stone.
Bellows?
No.
The wind thing?
It's it's a little fan, like a hand drill with a fan on the bottom of it that's in the furnace. That basically does a bellows thing. But I think he's making stone things now, so he's at the stone period. But I really just want to tell him, like, hey, next try to figure this thing out, because he is refiguring things out. It's pretty
reverse
cool.
engineering.
It's super cool. He just made an entire mud hut in the middle of a forest.
That's a handy skill to have.
While using a modern camera to film the whole thing.
Yeah, but that's the only thing modern he uses.
I know.
It's crazy. Well, you guys should watch him sometime. But I want him to figure this out.
We'll check that out. Sounds pretty interesting.
I feel like he would be successful. He'd be like, oh yeah, obviously this is how they did it, and do it in like 2 minutes, and everybody would be like,
great,
oh.
Because the thing is, as we talked about, there's so much fuel needed to make this process happen on this scale that nobody knows.
Right?
The math doesn't seem to add
up. Although
I
will say, I feel like none of these experiments probably did justice to the amount of time and energy that was put into the originals. Mm-hmm. So we say, well, the experiments fell down. Well, did you spend a month making them? Probably not, right? Did you spend a year and 50 people making them? Probably not.
But then again, that makes it even more mysterious, because why the hell would they take all the time and trouble to do this?
Well, to be safer in their homes?
Maybe.
We'll actually talk about some of that.
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about why, probably.
Yeah. We have gone through theory subsection A.
Yeah.
And we are now about to get into theory subsection B.
Which is why.
But first, let's take a quick break.
This just in, rich heiress Victoria Van Crest discovered dead in her hotel room in Maui while honeymooning. And of course, guess who the main suspect is? This sounds just like the Tina Watson episode, doesn't it? But no, this is actually part of a new game called Dispatch by Breakout Games. You've probably heard of those guys, but they are the pioneers of the immersive escape room. They've got a new thing. It's a little bit different. What happens is every month they send you a new installment of the serial mystery game. It's a box full of all kinds of clues, puzzles, and there's also some secret online content to help you solve the case. But again, it's about a murder mystery. The heiress who's murdered on her honeymoon, her husband, James Smith, has disappeared, and he's the main suspect. But we're thinking, there might be something bigger and more sinister at hand. But, you're going to need to figure that out. This game is all about you putting on your detective hat and solving the mystery. It takes months to do. It's, about 12 installments, I think. Got some in the mail from them the other day. My cats are very jazzed about it because it comes in a cardboard box. That's it. Doesn't get any better than that, does it? Intrigued? Well, satisfy your curious mind with 50% off your first delivery. Go to breakoutdispatch.com/sideways and use this code sideways to subscribe. Again, breakoutdispatch.com/sideways and use the code sideways to get 50% off your first delivery. So, Dispatch by Breakout Games. Cat approved.
We're back. Theory subsection B.
Why?
Why? Absolutely why.
You should have just called it
Did you
section
overemphasize
Y.
the H in why?
Why?
Well, decoration is the first reason that people might have been doing this. So some researchers have theorized that the reason for going through the process of vitrifying the stone walls was aesthetic, is basically if you are so rich and so powerful in this time of history that you can exert all of that manpower and money onto a wall to then, for just decorative reasons, melt it. And remember, things that are glassy inside of a stone wall like that, they look a little weird, and the colors can be pretty today.
Yeah.
Not all of them are, some of them you can't even tell, but melted stone is a very unusual thing, and that could have been an expression of your wealth or your power to those around you, especially if you're a rich trader or a king or whatever.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know. I mean, maybe,
yeah.
But that seems extravagant. But then I think about some of the castles that were built,
or even things that some of the rich people do these days.
Yeah, just to prove how rich I am.
Yeah, well, if you look at Inca stonework, for example, they went above and beyond what they really needed to do to build a wall.
Hey, if we're talking above and beyond, let's talk about the Egyptians.
Yeah, that's
who marble coated and gold plated their stone structures to their own death. Like what?
Yeah. So it's not outside the realm of possibility.
No.
The next sub-theory here as to a reason, this is actually one that I came up with on my own, and I titled this Stability. If these walls are a couple feet thick, if we live in Portland, where for the last several years we've gotten a ton of rain in the winter time, and stacked stone walls that have been in place for over 100 years have started to blow out because of the water pressure. And they're just 1 layer, 2 layers deep. Now imagine what would happen if all of those stones, like a concrete or mortared wall, were welded together. They would be less likely to bulge out. You wouldn't have to build in dead man, which is do you know what a dead man is in a retaining wall?
Let's pretend we don't.
Okay. It is something that penetrates into the embankment of the wall and is like a T structure that is tied to the wall. So in order for the wall, it's an anchor. For the wall to push out, that whole T structure, that dead man's got to come out. Well, you don't have to do that if the entire wall is unified in this whole expanse and get at least as much, if not more, rain than we do.
They get a lot of rain.
So this would be a great reason to take embankments on the hill that your village or fort or castle is built on top of and vitrify them.
Yeah.
Because the thing is not going to blow out from underneath you.
Yeah.
Like in giant rainstorms.
Yeah. Or ice.
Yeah.
Ice is
storms.
another one.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have nearly the kind of effect that they would on just a simple stacked wall.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got, water stuck in between every single one of those little rocks and it, freezes and expands and,
it's going to be harder for it to destroy it. So, I mean, again, this is what I was thinking of as I was doing the reading. It's not in the reading.
It's what I think of, too, which is, like, weird that nobody else thinks that, which makes me think that that's like I always have this thing when we have so